sitting here talking to you.
Good. Call to order the Planning Commission meeting for July 13th, 2022. If everyone would please rise. Mr. Mako will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg.
here.
Hicks.
Here.
Mako.
Here.
Shapaka.
Here.
Siriano is absent. Tamarkin.
Here.
Wester.
Here.
All right, next on the agenda is additions and corrections. We have none. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Hicks.
A motion by Mr. Hicks. Do I have a second?
Second, Mako.
Second by Mr. Mako. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Hicks.
Yes.
Mako.
Yes.
Greenberg.
Abstain.
Shapaka.
Yes.
Tamarkin.
Yes,
Wester.
Yes.
motion passes. Next, we'll turn it over to Mr. Roth, our city attorney, to swear in the applicants.
I forgot my book.
He forgot his book. Hang on.
Just make it up.
I might have it here. I did it once.
You all probably know it by heart anyway.
Sorry about that. We are now at the public hearing portion of the meeting. The public hearing will operate as follows. Administrative staff will make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant or their representative may then make a presentation or comment on the application. Public comment will then be open for 3 minutes allowed per speaker. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Speakers must complete a speaker slip and come to the podium and state their name. The applicant will then be given 10 minutes to comment. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at discretion of the chair. If there is more than one application pending for a particular address, the presentation on each application may be consolidated and presented as one. At this time, will persons wishing to present testimony this evening please rise and raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, state I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. All right, we will move on to the application portion of the meeting. I'll read them into the record. First, we have V-00202022 to consider a variance application to vary Chapter 1153.01A of the codified ordinance of the City of Gahanna for property located at 535 Office Center Place, parcel ID 025-009488, current zoning SO, NVA Vet Clinic, Seth Bocher, applicant. And I will turn it over to the city,
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Blackford, to give a presentation.
Appreciate that. Michael Blackford here with the Department of Planning. On your screen is the location and zoning map. Office Center Place is the road that this parcel accesses off of. It's the northern parcel here. This is Kemba. In this location, you have Hickory House up here. To give you a little bit of an idea where we're at in the city. Zones SO, which is suburban office and institutional, that is one of our most limiting zoning classifications. It really allows for a handful of medical and professional office uses. Tonight, there's a request for a use variance to allow for a vet clinic. Again, suburban office is a very limiting zoning as far as what uses are allowed. Many types of medical uses are allowed by right or conditional use. A veterinary clinic, the way the code works, at least for this zoning, it refers to the SIC code, which is the Standard Industrial Classification System for uses. That book really says that medical uses on people are under one category, medical activities on animals are totally different. So it looks as a vet service as an agricultural, forestry, and fishing use. It's really medical on dogs and pets instead of people. This is a medical building. If you've been back there, you know, it was medical offices. The entire building is vacant. From the application they provided, it looks like they'll be occupying the entire building. Because the current or previous use was medical, and this is really a medical activity, it looks like very little permitting is going to be necessary for them to open up and operate out of the facility. This is the site plan that they provided. The only thing really to show on here is the fence. This is the only improvement that I can see would be necessary. They're proposing a fence here, fenced-in area for the animal relief area. That's still a very nice setback. I know it's not dimensioned, so I can't give you exactly what this is. But if this is 30 feet, it's at least 30 feet from the property line here, so it's a nice separation. It is adjacent to some residential, but it's really the parking area and some garages, not to the actual homes. So staff, we really don't see any incompatibility that this would create by allowing this particular use. When we look at use variances, there's 3 criteria to consider: special condition of property, building, or use, necessary preservation of property rights, will not adversely affect surrounding properties. I know that's the one staff likes to focus on, is how compatible and consistent is the request with what's built and how would that affect it. And again, it's staff's opinion that this really wouldn't have any adverse impacts. It's a vacant, I believe it's just under 10,000 square feet, the building, and it's entirely vacant, so it'd be good to have a user in there. We do recommend approval. Again, it's a very similar use. There's really little type of permitting improvements that need to be done. That's kind of an indication to staff that it's appropriate, again, because it was built in a similar fashion. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackford. Would the applicant like to speak? Please state your name, address, and relationship to the project.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey L. Brown. I'm an attorney with the firm of Smith & Hale, 37 West Broad Street, Suite 460, Columbus, 43215. I'm here on behalf of an existing Gahanna business. They're currently located at 610 Morrison Road. Their business is growing and they need more room. So this seemed to be an appropriate building because, as staff has indicated, we're just really talking about the type of patients that are being treated in an existing medical building. And this would also allow them to increase their number of employees. They currently have around 40. They hope to be able to grow to 60 in this new building.
Good. Thank you very much. We will now open up. Does anyone from the public like to speak on this application? And I assume we've received no correspondence.
Correct.
We will now close the public portion of the meeting and open up to the committee for questions.
Will there be any pet boarding, or will this strictly be just for medical purposes?
We do have overnight stays for animals that need, and we do have some ancillary boarding that isn't related to the medical treatment.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Blackford. Will that fenced-in area need to come in front of us?
They are allowed to submit a fence permit, and that would be an administrative review.
Okay, good.
So long as it meets code, it's an administrative review.
All right. Seeing no more questions or comments, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for variance application V-0020-2022.
I have a motion by Mr. Greenberg. Do I have a second?
Second by Hicks.
Second by Mr. Hicks. Any discussion? Mr. Hicks?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll be in support of the variance request. It does fit in this area. And as the application mentioned, their current business is relatively close to this spot. I appreciate Mr. Mako's question, though, because we don't want a kennel in this location, but if it's ancillary to the medical procedure or limited to that, that doesn't, I don't have a problem with it, so I'll be in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm also in support of it. The big reason is they're taking over the whole building. If they were just taking over one floor, I think that would create some issues with the future tenant. So having that whole building under their control is a good thing.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Shpaka. All right. Clerk, can we take a vote?
Greenberg,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Chappaka,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Wester,
Yes.
Mako.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. We look forward to the expansion of your business here in Gahanna. All right, next up, we have V-0021, 2022, to consider a variance application to vary Chapter 1151-15Q4 of the codified ordinance of the City of Gahanna for property located at 617 Fondale Place, parcel ID 025-004127, current zoning PUD. Rob Hicks, applicant. Mr. Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our next item here, we have another variance request. This time the zoning is PUD, and that's relevant for residential and where structures can be placed. This is Fondale, this is Landover. If you're looking at the screen just to the left of the screen, which would be west, is where we're at. So this is fairly close to City Hall here. You can see Rocky Fork Boulevard. The request is a variance for placement of 2 accessory structures in the front yard of a corner lot. The lot is zoned PUD. The PUD section of our code for single-family types of uses say that accessory structures are required to be located to the rear of the building. So there's 2 front yards. That means our code says there's 2 rear yards. So there's 2 different areas where accessory structures could be placed. There are 2, I'll say, it says proposed, really they're there, structures. One's 120 square feet, the other one's 85 and a half square feet. Both extend about 8 feet into the front yard. So here you see the image on the left. This is the entirety of the site. You can see here the 85 and a half foot structure. This is the 120 square foot structure. What the code says is that it has to be to the rear of the structure. So in this case, with 2 rear yards, if you come straight down from the corner of the house right here, this is where those structures could be located and meet code. So I guess that shows up a little bit better here. Right down here. So if these structures were moved at about 8-10 feet, they would be compliant with code. Here's an image that the applicant was kind enough to provide of those structures. This would be looking from Fondale to the this is what we call like the second front yard. It kind of looks like the rear of the house, but this is all a front yard. So this is what you see from the road. Applicant was kind enough to provide some pictures here of the internal to the site. Here you can see what's going on the property inside the fenced area. Variance, again, there's 3 different criteria that should be evaluated. Is there a special condition of the property, building, or use? Is it necessary for the preservation of property rights? Would it adversely affect the surrounding properties? As the staff report indicated, staff does not support the request. This was a result of a 2022 code enforcement violation. Notice the structures. One of the structures was built without a permit. The other one was built incorrectly with the permit. There was a permit approved in 2020 for a shed. That shed was located, if we go back to this, in this general area, but it was located behind the property line, or that front yard line, I should say. Staff did make a comment in the review of that we could approve it because it was to the rear of the house. We can't approve it's in the front. It was built in the front. Again, it's a corner yard. Corner yards a lot of times have have some funky yard shapes. Really not the case. Because there's 2 rear yards, it actually allows for more area than typical lots of where the structures could be placed compliant with code. There does appear to be room to locate those structures without any issue. I know the applicant would disagree with me, and he has provided some images that showed some topography. Here's this doesn't show up on your screens very well. It shows up a little bit on mine, but this is a map of, this is the property. There's topography lines on here, and this general area of the home, this is fairly flat according to our topography layer on GIS. There is some topography change, and I think the applicant said about 5 feet of slope in this area. Again, our data would support that this area is a little bit tricky to place something, but again, this whole rear yard area looks to be pretty flat from what we have. So staff does believe that there's an alternative location that would meet code. That's why we don't support this request. Happy to answer any questions, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackford. Would the applicant like to comment? Again, state your name and address.
Robert Hicks, 617 Fondale Place, Gahanna. The flat area that he's talking about is, I have a shed there, and it takes up pretty much that,
A little closer.
it pretty much takes up that whole space. Where he's, could you go back to that one picture? Where I actually have another drawing where my actual shed is. I'm sorry. Could I show you guys this, where the actual shed is located?
Yeah, you can pass it around, and then we'll enter it into the record.
Yeah, right there's one. The shed is in the area where the yard is flat. So the reason I put it there was, it was really the only space I could put it that wasn't right against my house, blocking a window, or, and as far as the mower roof that I built for my riding mower, I put it there because if I put it over on the other side of my house, that would be about 5 feet from my neighbor's back door, their porch door. And I store, my lawnmower there, my grass clippings until refuge day. And I just didn't want to keep my grass clippings right outside his back door in case it would start to smell or whatever. So that's why I put it over on the other side. And I didn't realize that even though it's inside my fence, that part of it was my front yard. I thought it was all considered my backyard. So I thought it was okay to put it there. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Stay at the podium, we're going to have questions for you. Is there anyone from public who would like to comment on this application? Seeing none, and we did have some additions to the record, which were some pictures sent in by Mr. Hicks.
Correct.
Which we will enter those into the record, the emails you sent late in the day today. Okay, we'll close the public portion of the meeting and turn it over to the committee for questions. Mr. Hicks, our other Mr. Hicks, no relation.
Thank you. For the record, Rob, I just wanted, you and I aren't related, correct? Yeah, as far as we know. So I did want to just state I don't have a conflict with this because we're not related. So, Rob, do you have a shed and then plus 2 additional accessory structures?
Correct.
And again, you may have already mentioned it, but can you walk us through what they're used for?
One is a playhouse for my granddaughter. I stopped working on it as soon as I got the notice, but eventually I'd like to put a sandbox in there, a climbing wall for her, some swings. But right now it's just got some small toys that she plays on. When she comes over during the week a lot. I babysit her. The other one, as you can see, I keep my mower there, some yard equipment. Behind the mower, you can't really see, is where I keep bags of grass clippings that until yard waste day. I don't know if you know, if you got bags of grass, sometimes they can start to smell, especially when the grass is damp. And I just didn't want to put it over on the other side of my house, right next to my neighbor's back door.
How are these two structures, how were they built? Like, are there footers? Did you pour concrete footers or?
It's just 4x4 posts into the ground with concrete.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
They told me that I didn't need a building permit, so I went ahead and built them, and then I found out that that's actually part of my front yard, which I didn't realize.
Yes, Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Shabaka.
I got a couple questions for Robert. Let's just say that it doesn't go well here today. Is there anything that you can offer to hide by color, additional landscaping? It's pretty stark how it sits on the front of the house. I know it's a side, but being a corner lot, you do have a condition and a responsibility to keep up that appearance. And I would say that the fort-like characteristic of this is not characteristic for the neighborhood. So do you have any ideas of what you could possibly do to help, I guess, hide this or lessen the
Yeah, I could
character?
plant trees in front of it, or that would definitely be a possibility.
So you're not averse to putting some trees and some good thick shrubbery in there to
No.
help define that a little bit better?
No, I wouldn't be against that at all.
The red roof, would you be inclined to paint the roof a different color?
Yeah, I could paint the roof.
And possibly the fence itself? Maybe a little bit more complementary color. I'm taking it that the elevation that's shown here, the portion on the left is the neighbor's fence? Or is that part of your yard also?
That's all my fence.
That is all your fence? Is there a gate
Yes,
there on that
there's a-
side?
Yes, there's 2 gates, one on each side of the playhouse.
Is it big enough to just pull a lawnmower through or something, or not to actually
They're
drive through
actually
and park
both-
in there?
They're actually both about 8 feet wide. And then I have a third one over on the other side of my house.
So if you did some landscaping in there, those would kind of get blocked?
Well, they're not directly in front of the roof. There's no gate. There could be trees put in there. There's only a gate right in between the 2 roofs, and then there's a gate between the roof and the corner.
So do you have an estimate of how much you think it would cost to keep one end of the structure in play, move the post along the fence towards the yard? I mean, is that
I'm sorry.
how much you think that would cost to flip that design? So instead of having the, let's just say, I don't know, is that the north side, Michael?
I think that's the east side of the property.
Okay, so the east side. So if I flipped it to the other side, just basically kept the 2 posts that's on the west side, move
I'll
these
put
2
it over
posts on the
that
east
Well,
side.
that's where my yard goes down. That would take a lot of dirt to truck in to get that land flat enough.
So it immediately drops after this structure, the grade drops down.
Towards the southeast corner of my yard. It drops about 5 feet in a distance of about 15 feet. It's probably about a 30-degree angle.
Yeah.
My mower, it's hard to mow sometimes.
How long has this structure been up?
Actually, it's not even finished. I stopped as soon as I got the notice.
So it's been less than 2 years, or
Well, it's been since winter.
not even that? All right, no more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Greenberg.
Were there any comments from any other residents?
No, sir.
Okay. Question is there any way to lower the structures so they'd be below the fence line? With the height that they're at, especially the
Well,
lower?
the fence is 6 foot, so you would have to really duck to get under it if you did.
Well, how tall are they now?
That one there is 12 feet, and the mower is 8 feet.
So the playhouse is 12 feet.
Right, what I did was my shed is next to it. I just basically, I wanted to match the same roof line as my shed. So it didn't look out of place.
And from your position is there's no place to move it onto, either of those onto your property that would make sense and be in compliance?
I could move the mower roof, but it would be right next to my neighbor's backyard, which I'd rather do without than to upset my neighbor. The other one, the playhouse, no, I don't think so.
Okay, just one side comment, you, and may not have anything to do with this, but that you said you use the mower and you collect the grass clippings. It would probably be beneficial not to collect grass clippings and leave the clippings on the lawn, let them decompose every week. That's very healthy for the lawn and would be less trash that you would be throwing into the landfill. So that's all the comments I have.
Mr. Mako?
One quick question, point of clarification on the permit or lack of permit. You, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you stated that, you said they said you did not need a permit. Could you
Yes, Mike
clarify
Frey.
who they is? Was it someone from the city?
Mike Frey, I think his name was.
Mr. Blackford?
Yeah, so a building permit's not, but a zoning permit is, and a zoning permit was filed for, and we weren't able to prove it. That's why there's a variance. So there were building permits that were applied for in 2020. The reason why it was a building permit is because the shed was supposed to be 200 square feet. That's the magic trigger for when building needs to look at something. So if it's under 200 square foot, it's a zoning permit, not a building permit. So there were permits required, not a building permit. That doesn't mean there's no permits, and the zoning permit was applied for.
Well, the shed and the roof are two different structures. They're not connected. So that, these were not applied for in 2020.
These are required to have a permit. A permit was filed after the code enforcement violation.
A permit was required. Can you say that again?
He just asked you to repeat what you just said.
Yeah, I'm looking for you to make sure that that's
Yeah.
okay. So permitting is required. A zoning permit is required.
Well, that's because I didn't realize it was in my front yard. I thought that it was fine. I thought it was in my backyard. So yes, I did apply for a zoning permit. Well, I don't know if I did. They just told me I just needed to apply for a variance.
There is a permit that's submitted and under review. We are unable to approve it until the variance either gets approved or whatever that looks like.
I can tell you
You have to
guys,
come here
I wasn't
first.
even thinking about this in 2020.
Right.
That permit is for the structure.
It's for one of the structures. Only submitted a permit for one. There's two structures on here.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, let me go back. Yes,
Really,
before,
Really, there's three
I know
structures
what
if
he's
we count
talking
the
about
shed.
now.
We don't know of any shed. The shed didn't show up on his site plan that he submitted on this request. So instead, there's these two structures are all we see. There isn't a shed on this property according to the site plan that was submitted.
I got a permit for my shed, but let me back up. Before I got my shed, yes, I did put in a permit to build onto the back of my house. That's probably what he's talking about. That was denied. So then somehow I told him to forget about that permit, and then I thought, I'll just go ahead and buy a shed. That was the easiest way to do it, just buy a shed. So then I applied for the shed, and it was approved.
Okay. Mr. Wester?
Yes, thank you. For my edification, Mr. Blackford, how did this come to the attention of the city?
It was spotted by code enforcement.
And that was for what?
that it was clear to code enforcement that these structures were unpermitted because they could tell just by driving by that that's not consistent with our rules. So that's when I believe a zoning certificate, which is a permit for these structures, was applied for afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. So let's go back to the shed. The shed was applied for. Does the shed have a red metal roof?
Yes.
So when you drive by, which I just did right before the meeting, there's a lot of red roof out back.
Yes.
And some of that is the 120 square foot play area, and some of that is a 200 square foot shed.
Yes.
But from the road, it looks like one very large structure.
But it's not connected.
So it's not connected, so somewhere in there, there's a break.
Yeah.
And the picture that's on the screen here, you only see straight on, but if you were a little to the right or a little to the left, you really see a whole lot of red roof.
Correct.
And go back one, Mike. Is that crack in there? Is the shed, but we just on the left picture?
Correct. Yes.
So when they're not connected, though, they're separated by an inch.
Yes.
Okay. And the play area is against the fence, and the shed is a little bit into the yard.
Yes.
So the shed would be, I guess, technically in the backyard.
Yes.
It's this play area, which is kind of draped over here, but from the road, it looks like one contiguous structure. And again, even when I see the 120 square foot, I am not an engineer, but the thing looks very large.
The shed's very large, too.
Yeah. Yeah, the shed's large. Let me ask Mr. Blackford a question. We have a 6-foot fence and a 12-foot structure. Is there code on that? If I get approved for a shed, can I build it as high as I want, or is there?
No, that's a great question, and 15 feet is what's allowed. So the height is compliant with code. It can be up to 15 feet for unattached accessory structures.
So if this roof was removed that we see in this picture on the left, if it's not approved and that roof is removed, the shed is compliant?
It is. I think I'm learning about what's actually built out there. Just haven't had an opportunity to, I can't see it from the road. So the shed appears that it was, placed consistent with the permit, which is in the rear yard. So the shed is fine. That roof is what the issue is, that and the other structure.
And if you go back to the street view now, where it's added on there, would that be considered part of the structure or an add-on to the 6-foot fence? The wood that's kind of the A-frame.
It's separated.
How would we review it?
It's a unique situation, so I'm not 100% certain, but I would say it looks to be, this looks to be, I think, by a building code definition, this is attached. So it's really an addition to the shed, which probably doesn't really run afoul of, like you said, like any accessory size limitations or height. But because it's attached, you basically have, it's all really one structure in the eyes of like a building code. So the whole entire thing would now not meet code because a portion doesn't. Obviously, it's relatively easy to rectify that because the shed's compliant with code. But it's really sort of an addition to a shed by building code.
According to Mike Frey, he said, as long as it's not supported by the shed and it's separated, it's fine.
That may be because we're talking about very nuanced things with state codes that, I'm not an expert. This is a unique situation. Regardless of that, permitting is required. Toll permit was required. He's filed a permit. So, we're going down the correct permitting path.
The permit that you're talking about has been squashed. That was an addition to my house.
That I did do some research, and I know that there was originally going to be addition to the house. Then there was a shed permit. And then after the code enforcement violation of January of this year, there was a zoning permit filed for one of these two structures.
Is that when I applied for the variance? Is that the zoning permit?
The variance is a separate application. That was the comments from staff was, we cannot approve this because it encroaches into the front yard, you need a variance. That's why we have a variance, that's why we're here today.
Okay.
And are there restrictions on the size of a shed? So it can be 15 feet high. Is there restrictions on the square footage, on the floor plan?
There's roundabout square footages, and it varies based off of zoning. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. There are size limitations. We usually run into it with garages. When we've seen variances for garages, it's usually the height and the square footage, which is, I want to say it's like 30% of the gross overall structure. So it's probably not running into that issue. I think it's just strictly a placement challenge that we have before us.
Okay.
I'd like to
Mr. Shabaka.
Get a follow-up question here, because as confusing as this seems to be. So the image on the left, there is a shed to the right of that opening
Yes,
that is
have you-
compliant with an A-frame.
Do you see the dark line in the
Yep.
roof?
Yeah,
To the right is the shed,
is the actual shed.
to the
So the
left.
shed was originally built in compliance, it lined up with the house, everybody was good.
Yes,
So then you elected just to carry the A-frame out to create a little shelter for the granddaughter to the front of the property.
right.
That image could be greatly reduced if that was a shed roof, like the shed that's here on the right image. And it would go up and hit the A-frame, and you would have to put a side there on the A-frame, because if the shed was there, it should have a side on it. That would be a little bit more visually pleasing and massing, because the massing of this, it looks kind of odd just because you brought the gable out to
I
the
can-
fence.
Okay. Well, my climbing wall that I was going to build was going to go on one side of it. But I wasn't going to enclose both sides, but I could come up with something if you wanted me
Right.
to.
So the image that we have with the massing and bringing that gable to the front was creating a lot of the issue. So if we can reduce that massing,
Are you saying masking?
it's a massing, M-A-S-S-I-N-G, it's like to block the shape. So you have a solid fence, 6-foot-high fence.
Yes.
You can't see through it, so the massing of it's very heavy. So then you have the peak above that makes it even heavier. Where the shed roof on the other side, since it's lower, it doesn't come into view as much as the overall look, because
Well, the roofs are the same. The roofs, it looks from the road like one
yeah,
continuous
so what
roof
he
that
added,
goes
and that's what I was.
25 feet.
As Mr. Blackford was saying, I finally clicked in that he brought the roof out from the existing shed. So if that roof was the portion of the flat roof, not the gable, it would be a little bit more aesthetically favorable on my end, because if you had landscaping and did something that drastic, I'm looking for how we can get this through and fixed without ripping it all out.
Yeah, I could definitely put trees to hide it. I don't think I could lower it.
I just have a better understanding now of what is out there.
Mr. Wester?
Yes, this may be a mute question, but does this neighborhood have a homeowners association,
No,
or did it?
not that I know of.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hicks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up on my question earlier, I had asked if the pole, like how the structure was affixed to the ground, and you said the posts were sunk in concrete. The pictures that you submitted in your email, okay, the left-handed picture, again, I can't tell 100%, but it doesn't look like the poles against the fence do anything, but they sit on the ground, it looks like.
No, they're in the ground. They're 3 foot in the ground.
Okay. And how is the shed foundation? Is it on a slab? Is it on skids?
It's sitting on block, which is sitting on 4x6 runners.
Okay. So again, you're saying that the accessory structure is, has 4x6 poles that are sunk into the ground. with
4x4
concrete.
poles.
4x4, okay. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
All right, that's the questions from the committee. Let me just have a little discussion with our committee here. So we have this variance. Do we want to split the playground separate from the lawnmower area, or do we want to vote on it all as one? We have not had a lot of discussion on the lawnmower area. Do we want to do two separate votes, one on each? Can we do that, or do we want to do one for the two combined?
My feeling's the same on both of them, so it,
Okay. So one vote. So I will ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for the variance application number V00212022.
I have a motion by Mr. Chapaka. Do I have a second?
I'll second Hicks.
Second by Mr. Hicks. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Wester?
Mr. Chair, I will not be supporting this. You know, some neighborhoods have homeowner associations, HOAs, to enforce or to, for uniformity. Others, where the homeowners association is either defunct or inactive, depend upon the city code for uniformity. In the recent past, we had a request before this commission to allow for chickens. Some might remember that discussion. There are homeowners associations and there are deed restrictions in certain developments in this city that don't allow for chickens to be raised or to be housed on site. I forget the exact word. But it came before this commission as to whether or not that would be permitted. Again, it goes back to the city code. And that's why I can't support this. I think the code in this case is pretty reasonable. I think the city would work with the gentleman to come up with solutions for it.
Well, if I did make the ground flat over on the other side, I was afraid of, you know, it affecting the water drainage of my yard, my neighbor's yard. And as far as I know, Hunter's Ridge has never had a homeowners association. I've been here for 46 years. I had no homeowners association that I know of. I was raised on the other side of Hunter's Ridge.
Mr. Chapaka?
Yeah, I don't mind the encroachment to the variance, that you can use that property because you got two sides. I'm not in favor of this particular variance because of the images that we're looking at. If you came back with something that was a mono pitched on the left-hand side instead of the gable, some landscaping ideas, I hate to have you run around in a circle, but I can't support it as it sits right now.
And I'll make a comment. I agree with my colleagues. When I did drive by today, it's just too much red roof. This looks like from the outside looking in, it looks like a park picnic shelter in the backyard. It's
Looks like a what?
a park picnic shelter, what you'd see at a park. It's a huge A-frame roof in a backyard, painted red. And it's too much for the area, it's too much for the aesthetics of the neighborhood. And, if we go back to the rules of the zoning, Mr. Blackford, the rules of the variance, the bottom one, will it adversely affect the surrounding properties? And I struggle with that. I think it does, your neighbors aren't here, so, they were notified of this meeting, and they don't have a problem, but, neighbors will change over the years, and it's just, in my mind, too big, too much, for the space. Mr. Hicks?
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I don't feel that the criteria for granting a variance have been met for this application, so I will also be voting no.
Mr. Mako?
I also am going to be voting no on this. I just have a problem with this. Nothing personal against you, but again, I just don't think it, the look of it, the aesthetics just don't flow within the neighborhood. The other thing, I deal with variances in my day job, and in that role, I'm also very critical, going forward about granting variances. And again, I'm very hesitant in supporting this. So again, I'm gonna be voting no.
And Mr. Greenberg?
I also will be not in support, and hope that the applicant can come back with a plan that would be more acceptable to the city and to the planning commission.
How long will I have to come up with a new plan?
So that's an interesting question. And because the next step is, code enforcement, there's certain timelines and that we'd be more than willing to work with the applicant to allow some additional time if work is being done to get a revised plan. I mean, this has been going on since January to get to this point. So, I mean, there has been quite a bit of time, but we can allow for some additional time if a new variance is going to be submitted and working on a redesign.
So if I move everything back 8 feet, so it's not, even with my house, everything's good?
Yes.
And I can put my mower roof over next to my neighbor's back door, and if he complains about my grass stinking, too bad?
Well, I don't know if we said that because there are still placement criteria, so you'd have to submit a permit, you'd have to show the location, but there are setbacks that need to be adhered to. There are still rear yard setbacks, which in this
This would be
zoning,
my
I
side
can't
yard,
tell you
wouldn't
what they are because it's based on lot width and that, so it's a calculation, so I can't just say it's probably gonna be around 10 feet or so. So it won't be able to be located on the rear yard next to the other rear yard on the fence. Again, it's an accessory structure, it needs to be located away from property lines. It depends on where those property lines are, what those setbacks are.
So we're going to take a vote here, then we will encourage you to be in contact with the city. We can't tell you what to do or what not to do.
Okay, how do
But
I get in contact with this? Who do I talk to?
Be more than happy to talk with you. I mean, you talk to Mike Frey and
Blackburn?
I'll give you a card here once they're done.
So clerk, let's take a vote.
Chappaka,
No.
Hicks,
No.
Tamarkin,
No.
Wester,
No.
Mako,
No.
Greenberg.
No.
Motion fails. So, Mr. Hicks, sorry, we will ask you to make some adjustments, and the city will work with you, and we certainly respect your rights to use your property, but it also has to be aesthetically pleasing to the neighbors and to the street view. Let's move on to the next application. We have CU-0005, 2022, to consider a conditional use application for property located at 5175 Morse Road, parcel ID 025-011233, current zoning SO LabCorp. Tim Stevenson, applicant. Mr. Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Property, again, is zoned suburban office and institutional. North side is Morse Road. Here you can see to the left-hand side of the screen or to the west, this is Hamilton Road. Go down, here's Dogs Only. This is the Sage Park Senior Care Facility. facility. Right here is a medical building. Very modest request, but here's, in case you're familiar with the area, this is the building in question, and this is Sage Park, the assisted living facility off to the side. Conditional use request, specifically, it's to 8099, which is a conditional use within the suburban office zoning. This is the health and allied services not elsewhere classified. This is uses such as health screening services, which is what we're here tonight, blood banks, physical exams. Why this use is a conditional use is the only reason I can fathom a guess is that the specimen pickup that's being done here is not done by a doctor. If there was a doctor on site involved really at all, it would be an allowed use. So I know the applicant would say that there's very similar, the same activities being conducted in this building. Those would be allowed because they're in conjunction with a doctor. So in staff's opinion, it's a very restrictive zoning code as far as what's permitted by right and what's conditional use. It's only 1,200 square feet of space, so it's like I said, a modest space. Kind of similar, but very different than an earlier request with the vet, talking about how this impacts, when we have a conditional use or a use variance, how does this impact? This is, like I said, this is the same type of activities that are going on in the building already. So we don't see any negative impacts with that. For criteria for approval, is it a conditional use of the zone district? And are the zoning standards being met? It is. It is a conditional use of suburban office and institutional. There are no variances. This is a built environment already. It's occupying existing space. Is it in accord with appropriate plans for the area? It is. It's in accord with the plans. It's in accord with the zoning, in my opinion, and with the uses in the building. Would it have undesirable effects? Is it consistent with the development of the area? Again, staff does not believe it would have any undesirable effects. Very consistent. That's why we recommend approval. Again, sort of an editorial comment is our suburban office and institutional zoning is very limiting. There's not a whole bunch of uses that are allowed by right. In this case, it's a conditional use. And again, if this was the same use, it was in conjunction with a doctor, the SIC code would classify it differently and it would be allowed by right. So it's a little bit of a nuance there that kind of required the conditional use. So with that, I'll answer any questions. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Blackford. Would the applicant like to speak? Again, please state your name, address, and relationship to the project.
Tim Stevenson. I'm actually the regional manager for business development for LabCorp, 6370 Wilcox Road, Dublin, Ohio, 43016. And just kind of a comment about that the orders and the collections that we are taking place are actually given to us by an order from a medical clinician. And so it's not something that we're acting upon our own. This is actually a directive and a script that's coming in. So from that perspective, we are doing no testing on site. Everything is collected and then transported back to the facility in Dublin. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this application? Please come forward. State your name and address.
Leo McCann. I live at 1261 Amberlea Drive West, Gahanna, Ohio, 43230. I'm also president of the Amberlea Village Condominium Association. That condominium association sits directly south of where the building is right now. Have no really comments, just a question to the applicant, if I may. What are your hours of operation Sunday through Saturday?
Yeah, if you can please speak in the microphone because we are streaming these meetings and that's the only way they can hear you.
Currently, we do not have Sunday hours, and our hours Monday through Friday will be 7:30 till 4:30, and then on Saturday, it's currently 8 to 12.
Great, thank you for that information. We appreciate that. Additional question, that's the hours at this specific site then, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The collection of the specimens that takes place during the hours of operation or after the hours of operation?
Sorry, during the hours of operation.
Great. I have no further questions, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in tonight. Okay, no other questions from the public? Any written correspondences?
No, sir.
None? We will close the public portion of the meeting, turn it over to the committee for questions. Mr. Hicks?
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, is this, are you relocating an office to this location?
We actually are. We currently have one in Gahanna, and
On Johnstown Road?
yes.
Okay. So due to growth or?
It's a better facility, and it's just
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Shabaka?
so you're collecting. Are you storing overnight?
no, sir.
So everything is brought in, processed, and out of the building? There's no waste or anything that we're...
Correct. Everything will be picked up by our logistics or through our couriers, and everything will be transported back to the facility in Dublin.
So I envision things coming and things going, nothing being put in a dumpster,
Oh, no.
cleaned out.
No. And in fact, because if there is anything, we have to comply by medical waste pickup and things like that, so nothing gets left.
No more questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mako?
What are the collection times? Is it one time a day or is it multiple times during the day?
It's throughout the day, throughout the day. So we are open to the public, so folks have the capabilities to either schedule an appointment to come in, or they're free to walk in throughout the day.
And as a follow-up, after when business hours close, that's it in terms of collections and pickups?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing no more questions, we'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move for approval on CU 0005-2022, a conditional use application for property at 5175 Morris Road for LabCorp.
I have a motion by Mr. Wester. Do I have a second?
Second, Chapaka.
Second by Mr. Shabaka. Any discussion? Mr. Hicks?
So this is another application where an existing company is relocating. It's good that they're staying in Gahanna. This is a good business to have in our city. It's appropriate for the area. It's not, in my opinion, it's not going to have undesirable effects. So it does meet the criteria for granting a conditional use, and I'll be in support.
Thank you. Clerk, can we please call the roll?
Wester,
Yes.
Chapaka,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to our last one, we have two applications. We have V-0018-2022 to consider a variance application to vary Chapter 1163-08H of the codified ordinance of the City of Gahanna for property located at 213 Camrose Court, parcel ID number 025-006520, Woodside Green Park. Ooh, hang on. Current zoning PUD, Allen Little applicant. And we also have DR-0010-2022 to consider a design review application for site plan for property located at 213 Camrose Court, parcel ID 025-006520. Current zoning PUD, Woodside Green Park, Allen Little applicant. We'll turn it over to Mr. Blackford for a presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Last couple of items on for tonight. We have another property located within the PUD zoning. Here we have Stigler Road off to the left side of the screen, to the west, Woodside Green Park. We're gonna get to some pictures here in a moment. A fairly straightforward request, at least in my opinion. They're redoing the parking area with that. The parking and landscaping, there's some alterations there. They're doing some restriping, adding some much-needed parking from 49 to 76 spaces. Some landscape islands are being removed. It's a park. There's a lot of landscape around there. The PUD, so we have a design review. There's some design review guidelines within the PUD section of our code. Not really relevant on this case, being that it's a parking lot addition. You're not talking like a new use or anything. The variance before us is the code does require a 10-foot landscaped island between 2 rows of parking. We've seen this recently on a number of commercial developments. Probably maybe not ideal code. And this is relevant because of the new parking area and the additions going on or the renovation. So this is the existing conditions here. This is the parking area, existing parking, and this is really the area that you'll see on the next slide where that variance applies to. You have the parking here on the northeast part of the lot. Here you can see the parking lot additions. This is a great slide, really does a great job of showing what's new. Again, they're adding, I think, what was it, about 27 spaces or so, and they're doing some striping. This is the area where the variance applies to, just this area right here, because this is the section of code that says that there should be that 10-foot wide landscape island, and then you need to have shrubs planted in between this area. So it does apply only to a small portion of the property. And, in staff's view, when we looked at this, this is a frequent flyer for our variances. Typically, it's on commercial sites. This is a park. There's a lot of trees in and around this area. So by allowing a little flexibility in the design and granting that variance, again, staff doesn't believe that would have any adverse effect on any property owners or anything. It's not like lights are going to be shining into anyone's homes if that landscaping is not in place. And it looks like that pretty much covers what is written on this slide, is why we recommend approval of both applications. Happy to try to answer any questions, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackford. Would the applicant like to speak? Again, please state your name, address, and relationship to the project.
My name's Alan Little. I'm with the City of Gahanna and representing the Parks and Recreation Department. And I don't have any comments, but I'm willing and able to answer any questions that you guys have.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this project? Please, again, state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Edward Tweed, and this is my wife, Andrea, and we live at 214 Camrose Court, right next to the park. And I'd like to start out by just saying, looking at the proposed changes, we want to thank you for not taking away from the natural beauty of the area. I mean that. We thank you. However, if there's any property on that street that's more impacted by the overcrowding, it would be our property because we're right next to the park. And this only occurs a couple weeks a year and a couple hours per week. And I don't know if someone's complained or whatever, but I'm not so sure that it's necessary. I think the city should know that this is really a temporary situation, a few hours per week, and the rest of the time there's maybe 2 or 3 cars in that parking lot. But again, I'm here to comment and thank you for not taking away from the natural beauty of the area. Okay?
Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Bailey Tweed. Again, I live at 214. I would also like to speak for my neighbor who lives at 215 directly across the street from us. She can't be here tonight because she's at home dealing with COVID. Again, for the general outlay, we have no problem. Some of the concerns that we would like to discuss along with this, and it really may not be directly affected with that, is the amount of traffic that comes up and down this street on a regular basis. We have no guards, there are no closures to the park, there's traffic and people in and out of that park all hours of the night. There are no gates to stop it. They say the park closes at dark, but it doesn't. Okay? Unfortunately, myself and my neighbor pick up trash and garbage and debris that is left. Our concerns are more of the security factor than how you're going to establish. But again, another question I have is if you are moving that down in the way the park flows and floods, that those parking and moving some of that down according to floodways and the flood paths That could do more damage to the park than actually what is being recommended here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Little, would you like to respond?
If it's appropriate, I can
And let me just
speak.
state, we are here to approve zoning, to approve the parking lot, the additions and
Sure.
the variances.
Yeah,
We
I don't know
have anything to do
in
with
what
the
depth
operation.
you want response, but I've worked here for 28 years now, so I've seen the evolution of this park, and in response to some of the stormwater concerns over the years, we've moved the dumpster up out of the floodway. Some of the parking spots that we're gaining we're recovering where the dumpster used to be. But we did work closely with the city engineer, John Moorhead, with the floodway use permit, and to make sure that there was no issues that this would create. We are replacing at grade. There's no fill. There's no excavation. So everything that we're doing past engineer's review, and then we're here, of course, with your blessing to move forward with the project. The only islands that were removed were trees through attrition. They were saved with the original design of the parking lot. So the parking lot, the outline of it isn't changing. We're recovering some of the parking spots towards the nature playground that just went in a couple years ago, but the rest of it will just be gained through the removal of those parking lot islands. So yeah, I don't know if that answers any concerns. I can't address traffic, of course, and none of our other parks do have gates except for Pizarro, and that's so we can control traffic when there's flood conditions.
Thank you. And Clerk, we have no correspondence from the public?
That's correct.
All right. So we'll close the public portion of the meeting and turn it over to the committee for questions. Mr. Shabaka.
I have a couple, Mr. Chair. Mr. Little, how does the site drain?
Towards the creek, or downhill.
So-
There is no active stormwater structures. It is at grade. It has been sheet drained through the years. There is between, if you're looking towards the south, between the parking lot and the pond, we've done a rain garden. We worked through Central Ohio Rain Garden Initiative to create a rain garden in that area. So there is a swale that's fed by that rain garden. So there is some treatment before it goes in the pond. Silt falls out in the pond. There's a stormwater overflow that goes then out to the Big Walnut Creek.
So the runoff, how does it get out of the cul-de-sac?
Out of the cul-de-sac, I believe there's stormwater structures in that court. We don't experience water that comes out of Camrose into the front of the
Entrance
park,
road.
not to my knowledge at all. Yeah, like I'm not aware of any
Sworn in, I
stormwater
would-
that enters the park from Camrose.
Yes.
I'm sorry, and no, technically it doesn't. On both sides of those streets, there are storm drains. They do fill. I worked with FEMA in the mitigation and flood department, so that's really the only reason I am addressing that. At the end of the park, many people put their canoes and they go in and they swim. When we have 3 or 4 days of rain, you can guarantee this park is going to close. The water does not drain. It backs up into the park. And along the walkway, it's impossible for days during that time to be able to walk through it.
Actually, thank you for stepping up and coming. I have another question. When the park is crowded, do they park in a cul-de-sac? I mean, does it extend over?
They park in the cul-de-sac up and down the street and all up to right now. But those few parking spaces aren't going to change the traffic. Thank you.
So, thank you. Mr. Little. So, who came up with the magic number of, is it 79 now, parking spaces?
It was essentially just trying to optimize the existing footprint without encroaching on any of the green space. We resolved a safety issue when we created the natural playground between the parking lot and the creek, but we did not want to extend the parking lot towards any of the residential structures.
So the parking that's added there to the top of that sheet, were people parking there anyway?
Pretty much. The one part was used as a turnaround. We've gotten rid of the part where the dumpster used to be probably 15 years ago. And then the only part that is like the circle that's in the middle, the biggest oval, that comes in towards the nature playground probably a few feet, so we have room in the ingress egress lane to add those spots.
Clarifying it, putting a number on it, which is good. Mr. Blackford, can you put back the original, just the overall site? Is there currently a center island there now with a tree in it?
There are 3 separate ones of all different, like varying shapes. 2 of them don't have trees in them because they died years ago. There was 1 tree that needs removed. We were leaving the bookends just to help with ingress, egress, and traffic safety. So we left those islands that are on the very ends of the outer parking lanes. But
So
the
is
center
there-
islands themselves, we've removed.
So is there a compromise in your discussion that we take the last 4 spaces of that center island, instead of having the trees in between the 2 rows, take the last 4 spaces to the south and put a couple nice healthy trees there? I have 130 feet coming across that parking lot. Not that it's a huge heat source kind of a deal, but if I got some shading in there, that would help the people that are parking there. It helps the view even in this picture of hiding some of that from the air. I mean, it seems like a couple trees, maybe you don't get the 10-foot strip because they kind of get walked over and don't work anyway, but if we took 4 parking spaces off of that, does that really change the dynamics of the accessibility of the park or using the park?
I don't think it will change it dramatically at all. And as the Parks Department, we're willing to add trees anywhere. Obviously, our goal is to get people in the park and enjoying nature and the trees, so.
So it would also help with any of the runoff that would come to the creek because it would kind of absorb some of that.
Yeah, we did realign a traffic lane so that towards where she was saying the portage is, it does get some treatment before it goes in instead of straight down the concrete. But yeah, that's used as a portage and we'll still maintain access to the Blue Way for park users.
Here for the variance. Thank you, Mr. Liu.
Yes, sir.
No more questions.
All right, I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the approval of item V-0018-2022.
I have a motion by Mr. Hicks. Do I have a second?
Second.
I heard Mr. Greenberg first, so second by Mr. Greenberg. Any discussion? This is for the variance application.
Now, we've historically granted these variances, so I see no reason not to in this case.
Mr. Mako.
So I'm actually in this park weekly. I live in the area, and I definitely appreciate you coming out. I've seen those 2 or 3 times a year that people are backed up, parked on the cul-de-sac there. I'm very strongly in favor of this. I think this is definitely a positive thing for this particular park. Again, I'm there weekly. So again, just strongly in favor of this, and that's my comment.
Thank you. And my comment is follow up on what Mr. Hicks says. We've pretty consistently given variances to these center aisles. I think they're silly. My personal opinion, I think they are a trip hazard. I think people walk through them, and there's no reason to have that in our code, and eventually I think that code will change within time. And clerk, can we please take a vote?
Hicks,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Wester,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Shapaka.
Yes.
Motion carries. We have the design review.
Mr. Chair, I move the approval of item DR-0010-2022.
A motion by Mr. Hicks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wester. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the overall design, I think we can do away with 4 of the spaces on the end and put some trees in on that location. So I don't know how, on the weight of the vote, so that kind of sways me into I will not be in favor of the design.
Seeing no other discussion, clerk, can we please call the roll?
Hicks,
Yes.
Wester,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Shapaka,
No.
Tamarkin.
Yes. Motion carries. Mr. Lowell, thank you very much, and I do hope that you take Mr. Shapaka's concerns and see how you can incorporate them or use them in the park. With that, we'll move on to unfinished business. We have none. New business. We have none. Official reports. Mr. Roth.
Nothing to report at this time.
Mr. Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think looking at forecasting our next agenda, I think it'll be fairly light. I think at this point, we just have a residential variance of some type. So I think it'll be a lighter agenda July 27th. That's all I
Thank
have.
you.
Thank you.
And while we have you on the microphone, City Council.
One update to share this week, the final plat that I believe you all saw last time we met was before City Council. That was the one in the Crescent, which is in the Tech Center area. It did have the waiver to stormwater. That was all discussed, and it looks like that'll be on a forthcoming agenda for a vote and approval. Everything went well, so it looks like that's moving forward.
Good news.
Thank you.
Chair has nothing to report. Madam Mayor.
Oh, thank you. With Mr. Little being here this evening, I would note that our Parks Department has been working on an update of the Comprehensive Parks Master Plan. There should be a survey, I believe, available online. It was supposed to go online live today. So we encourage you all, if you did not receive a random hard copy of the survey, to go online and take that. It looks a little daunting, but it does not take long to actually go through the survey, but it will be really critical in identifying and guiding policy and projects, capital projects, et cetera, programming for the next decade within our Parks and Recreation Department. So thank you for your comments tonight.
Good. Thank you for your attendance. And with that, we'll pull the committee. Any comments? Seeing none, I also skipped, we have no correspondence or actions. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.